Welcome to the Book Faire Podcast. My name is Anthony, and this week we have a novel by debut Malaysian author Samantha Chong. Executive orders bring book bans to national parks, and Alabama's Fairhope City Council sees a surprising shift in the local library board. Later this week on Friday, we will have an interview with middle grade author Nancy Hudgens, so make sure you follow so you don't miss that. Now let's get started by looking at new releases, starting with Songbird in the Light by Billy Porter and Chris Clarkson, and illustrated by Charly Palmer. Performer Porter collaborates with Clarkson to tell the uplifting first-person story of a child described by their mother as her songbird, who finds strength in vocalizing. "When I sing, I feel like a tall sunflower dancing in the rain," the black speaker opens. "In contrast at school, I don't say much. They laugh at how I walk, and they laugh at how I talk." Encouraged by a supportive adult, Miss Irene, the youth finds the courage to go on stage, and matter-of-fact narration turns poetic as the child, leaning into avian motifs, asserts their emerging confidence. Palmer's color-saturated acrylic paintings frequently zoom in on their subjects, and vibrantly wrought birds surrealistically appear throughout, even carrying the speaker aloft. After the eventual performance ends in applause, birds seem to dance in flight. An aptly musical close for this fortifying story about finding one's voice. An author's note concludes, secondary characters are portrayed with various abilities and skin tones, and this book is recommended for ages 4 to 8. Next is Red River Rose by Carole Lindstrom. As addressed in an endnote, Anishinaabe/Métis author Lindstrom pulls inspiration from the Northwest Resistance of 1885 in Saskatchewan to deliver a rousing historical tale about standing up for what one believes in. After learning that her Métis community is at risk of being forcibly removed from their land by the Canadian government, 12-year-old Rose determines to do whatever it takes to protect her village of Batoche. As things throughout Batoche grow tense, Rose pleads with her parents to share stories of their similar ordeal in Manitoba and the Red River area in 1870. Though her family is hesitant to relive the experience by remaining in Batoche, Rose soon helps them see the value in aiding the burgeoning resistance. She assists in spying, gathering weapons, and generating a plan to stop an approaching steamboat carrying Gatling guns. Though the story is somewhat unevenly paced, it nevertheless excels in relaying potent depictions of the cycles of grief and loss that permeate Indigenous history as seen through the eyes of an indomitable protagonist who will engender empathy and inspire readers. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 11. Next is Clementine H. Hopeful is Not a Hero by Noah Corey. In Corey's subversive fantasy debut, informed per an endnote by the author's experience with gender queerness and childhood psychosis, a tween endeavors to create a better world. No matter how hard he tries to prove that he is very normal, spider-obsessed 7th grader Clementine H. Hopeful always feels like an outsider. Worse, he seems to be the only person who can see the mysterious floating faces in the nearby woods. Then he meets 12-year-old Bug and Bug's friend Anise, homeschool kids who use their mysterious magical abilities to spend their nights playing wildly imaginative games in the forest. With Bug and Anise, Clementine feels free to embrace the things about himself he hides from others, and to further explore his own personal expression and growing feelings for Bug. As reality and fantasy begin to overlap, Clementine discovers that there are monsters hiding in plain sight within his small Idaho town. Throughout this dreamlike tale, Clementine considers the cost of acquiring enough power to change his world, and take charge of his own destiny. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next is Olivia Gray Will Not Fade Away by Sierra Birch. A tween yearning for connection begins to fade from existence in this introspective and heartfelt tale by Birch. When Black 13-year-old Olivia starts 7th grade, she realizes that a lot of things have changed over the summer. All her classmates are suddenly obsessed with crushes, gossip, and popularity, and all of their attention is seemingly occupied by social media. Things have taken a similar turn, especially now that her beloved older brother is too distracted navigating his first relationship to focus on his sibling. Olivia would rather work on her art than talk about dances and boys, but the more overlooked and out of place she feels at school and at home, the more invisible she becomes, literally. As Olivia undergoes sporadic instances of physically fading in and out of reality, she finds comfort in her school's sympathetic new librarian and her classmate Jules, who also knows what it's like to feel unseen and ignored. While attempting to simultaneously fit in and remain true to herself, Olivia considers that she may be asexual and aromantic, experiences that Birch deftly wields into a timely story about complex emotions and queer identity. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next is One Word, 6 Letters by Adib Khorram. Khorram impresses with this searing, deeply felt dual POV novel about the aftermath of a thoughtless act and the process of making amends. Egged on by a friend, Kansas high school freshman Dayton shouts a homophobic slur during an assembly. While serving subsequent in-school suspension, Dayton connects with classmate Brody. Though Brody is mostly known for his raunchy jokes, Dayton is surprised to discover his hidden nerdy caring side. The pair's friendship becomes strained, however, when Brody's off-color commentary repeatedly sabotages Dayton's attempts to woo his crush. Meanwhile, student Farshid struggles to reconcile thoughts of his own sexuality with worries surrounding his self-image. Upon realizing that the slur could apply to him, he avoids talking about it by devoting himself to a punishing diet and grueling workouts in an exhaustive pursuit to gain more muscle. When Dayton and Farshid are partnered for a history project, the boys are forced to confront the consequences of Dayton's assembly exclamation. Urgent second-person narration expertly nails both teens' insecurities and self-perception. The result is a powerfully relevant and affirming story about trying to connect with oneself while navigating homophobia, misogyny, and toxic masculinity. This book is recommended for ages 12 and up. And the final title for this week is Prodigal Tiger by Samantha Chong. Chong blends family drama, supernatural suspense, and teen angst with Malaysian folklore in this arresting debut. For 5 years, 18-year-old Caroline Chua has been living in New York City, learning to hone her magical skills. But when her brother Aaron disappears, she is forced to return home to Penang. As the Hungry Ghost Festival, during which spirits become more powerful, approaches, it's imperative that Aaron is found so that he can take on his duties as Malaysia's next High Protector. Upon discovering that vengeful ghosts with a grudge against the Chua family have kidnapped Aaron to seize control of the island, Aaron's rescue becomes Caroline's top priority. To succeed, she must reconnect with the friends she lost contact with after leaving New York City, including JJ, her former love interest who still sets her heart aflutter. An experience of forging one's own life path while managing expectations is sensitively rendered alongside propulsive action sequences, dynamic plot twists, and affecting interpersonal conflict involving forgiveness, friendship, and self-advocacy. This book is recommended for ages 12 and up. Next, we'll be taking a look at some news. But first, if you appreciate the work being done on the Book Faire podcast, there are a number of ways to show your support. First, you can like, comment, or follow wherever you are currently listening to help push the show out to new listeners. Second, you can follow the podcast on Blue Sky, Instagram, and TikTok at Book Faire Pod. You can also go to patreon.com/thebookfair to find episodes posted early, as well as links to news sources used throughout the show. Following on Patreon is free, and there are no posts hidden behind a paywall. Of course, the best way to help the Book Faire podcast grow is simply to share it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Now, on with the show. Let's take a look at some news, starting with a national park pulling books off shelves from gift shops. Covered on this podcast several times by now, Executive Order 14523, Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History, is a directive that impacts federally run institutions. Federal land managers were ordered to conduct reviews for inappropriate content and to replace it with material that, quote, focuses on the greatness of the achievements and progress of the American people, end quote. The executive order also prohibits anti-American ideology, which has been interpreted by some as prohibiting references to slavery, civil rights, and even climate change in some cases. And now Redwoods Parks Conservancy has responded to this directive with a list of titles sold throughout the park. The list of titles flagged includes multiple books by and about Indigenous people. 9 titles in total were impacted and set to be removed from shelves. Only a few days after this story initially broke, it was announced that the titles were not to be removed, as Redwood Parks Conservancy is run by the state of California and not the federal government. Next, a quick story from Texas where community members speak out against book bans at a school board meeting. Last month, New Braunfels Independent School District held a board meeting where an educator and several parents expressed concerns over book bans and other impacts from the recently implemented bill SB 13, which prohibits the inclusion of material considered harmful to minors. One such impact came at the start of the school year, where NBISD suspended student access to school libraries while staff reviewed collections, checking for compliance with SB 13. The second side effect still impacting the district is a pause on procuring new materials for library collections. Melissa Wheeler, an 8th grade teacher in the district, gave public comment during the board meeting. Quote, "These books were aimed at reaching my 13 and 14-year-olds who come from a plethora of backgrounds. You might forget what books can do for them. They can offer identity, inclusion, and safety," end quote. Another issue that people are speaking out against is the district's use of AI to determine which books need to be reviewed. The process being used by the district leaves titles pulled from shelves until a manual review is completed. A parent spoke to the school board during the meeting. Quote, "Books removed purely by AI review is a grave review of technology. Representational and algorithmic bias are real problems in AI. They really exist, they really happen. SB 13 says have humans review it. There's a good reason for doing that." End quote. Residents of New Braunfels speaking out against the district inspires hope for the freedom to read. But it's important to remember that these stories are all coming up from SB 13, which was passed on the state level. Midterm elections are coming up, and this is the time to register to vote if you're eligible. If you're currently registered, check your status, as some states purge voter rolls, and eligible voters often end up having their registration status revoked. Let's move on to our weekly good news segment. I can't express how grateful I am that there has been good news to cover every week, and hopefully it doesn't go away soon. Prince and Knight, a picture book by Daniel Hake and illustrated by Stevie Lewis, is at the center of a battle coming from Maine. An anonymous post shared in conservative social media groups says a 5-year-old student from Pittston Randolph Consolidated School came home with a copy of the book Prince and Knight, and that people should be furious because the book is available to children. This trash fairy tale has a prince dumping princesses to hook up with a male knight, slay a dragon, tie the knot in a same-sex wedding, and party like it's no big deal. How dare they push romantic same-sex crap and marriage on these children? End quote. The post goes further, calling the simple presence of this book in schools indoctrination. Jane Beckwith, a Randolph resident who works as a language tutor, heard of the criticism and checked the book out herself. At a school board meeting discussing the title, Beckwith said, quote, "There is nothing objectionable about the language or illustrations in this innocent, charming book. An attempt to ban or restrict this book within our educational system would be misguided and unnecessary. Unless the goal is not to assess appropriate literature for children, but to enact rules that deny and erase the existence of LGBTQ+ people, which I believe this board and community should not do." End quote. Becky Fless, school board chairwoman, described the opt-out process that the district currently has. Quote, "You should, as a parent, have every right to go into a school and say, 'I don't want my kid reading that.' But you don't have the right to say, 'I don't want anybody else's kid to be able to read that either.' You don't get to do that for other people's kids." End quote. While Chairwoman Fless sounded indifferent about the book, she did go on to defend its inclusion. Quote, "Public education is public. That means we have to provide for every student. And if we have a student with 2 moms or 2 dads, our intention is not to isolate them. Just like we have books on people of color or people who may not be from America. There's a spot for everyone. We don't want anyone to get hurt or be bullied or feel unsafe or like they don't belong." End quote. The individual who shared the post to social media that started all of this also wrote, quote, "It is time we end this madness. There are several seats on our school board up for re-election in the coming months. It is critical that we secure those seats. When we do, this goes away." End quote. The reason I bring up stories about book banning, no matter how myopic, is because the people supporting censorship are far more mobilized in local elections. Time and time again, seeing stories like this from a small town in Maine, parents seeking to ban books are in the minority, and the community overwhelmingly comes to speak publicly, while pro-censorship groups largely operate in small online spaces. And the final story for this week comes from Alabama, where there has been a change to the local library board. Fairhope, Alabama has been the battleground between the state and county governments, where the state is withholding funding from Fairhope over policies relating to removing material that may be sexually explicit. And now the city council has appointed an anti-censorship candidate to the county library board. Gustavo Duahi is the newest member of the Fairhope Public Library Board. Duahi has been a vocal advocate of the library, speaking at meetings to support the board's decision to keep most of the challenged books in place. The lone vote against Duahi's appointment is Councilmember Josh Gammon, who abstained from voting. While Fairhope is still underfunded by the Alabama Public Library Service, it's refreshing to see the community continuing to fight against censorship. This is why local elections matter. If more apathetic individuals had abstained from voting, then we may have seen more advocates for censorship in the Fairhope City Council instead of the newest member. This will conclude another episode of the Book Faire Podcast. Coming this Friday, we have an interview with middle grade author Nancy Hudgens. If you'd like to stay up to date with the show, you can follow wherever you are currently listening or on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Book Faire Pod. If you'd like to help the Book Faire Podcast grow, you can also go to patreon.com/thebookfair. Following on Patreon is free, and there are no posts hidden behind a paywall. You can find links to news sources as well as episodes posted early. Simply add the RSS feed to your preferred podcast platform. Of course, the best way to help the Book Faire Podcast is simply to share it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Thank you so very much for listening, and as always, I'll talk at you next time.